It's the closest place to where I live. I live here in San Leandro. It's the closest place to where you can just kind of feel like you're not in that hustle bustle of life, right? It's Sunol. It's beautiful. And Linda, share us about your dialectic in your town.
I moved to Sunol about 40 years ago. We moved there for the school, actually. Little small school associated with 4-H. You know, you had small classroom sizes. It really was a wonderful little country school. Not perfect, but a place we felt we could raise our family. And it has changed over the years. And we are in the middle of the fight you see all over the country. So what happened, actually, I was gone. They took down the California state flag and flew the Progress Pride flag at our school. First of all, that superintendent principal, who is now leaving of her own accord, we did force her out, is responsible for that. And she wants to throw the maintenance guy under the bus. But while I was gone in France, I learned when I came back in July that they had an issue. Somebody in our little community came and asked to fly a Christian flag since she had flown this pride flag. And of course, Marlene, would not go with that. And he says, well, then I'm suing you because Shurtleff versus Boston found that Shurtleff had been, and this was 9-0, the Supreme Court had found 9-0 that Shurtleff had been discriminated under the very same circumstances. So at any rate, Mr. Jurgensen, who is the president of our 3-person board, asked our school attorney to draft a resolution that would keep our little school safe from legal assault, because one lawsuit sincerely could bring our school down. And so our district's attorney drew up this thing, and he said, this is sound legally, it's defensible, and basically it said we will only fly the American and state flag. And all hell has broken loose in that town. We had, on September 12th, we had 150 to 200 LGBTQ people from Castro Valley, from San Francisco, from Berkeley, from Fremont, come and harass and intimidate us as well as members of my community. And instead of being incensed by this, a lot of people turned on us and called us bigots and homophobes and all the like, Anyway, so Ryan Jurgensen and myself are fighting a recall in our little town, and the Democrat Party has sworn that they will back and take us off the board. And they're doing everything they can. There's a number of things that have taken place that show us, the Democrat Party sent out to their members, but interestingly enough, those they knew to be supporters of ours didn't get this message. But all the others that were either not known or on the other side got this message in their cell phones that they should get out and sign that petition and influence anybody they could to sign that petition. So whatever money that takes, that's happened. And you all probably are aware that the Democrat Party funded $4 million to get 2 school board members off of the Orange County School Board, and they succeeded. Those 2 conservative people in an area that is conservative, and we're not in an area that's conservative, are gone. And so I don't know if my time is on the school board is limited or not, but we're trying really hard, and I have found, to answer Wayne's question, talking one-on-one to people is the way I'm having influence. So I'm knocking on doors. It's taking many hours, and except for my left knee, which wants to give out, it's good exercise, but if you are in a mob, any of the school board meetings, we're being shouted down. We're being totally, the lies. Yes, what are you going to say?
I was just going to say that's what they want to wear you down and tear you out.
All the signs.
I commend you to 1,000%. Thank you. Don't stop and don't let them tear you, wear you down. You're there.
Trying not to.
Chin up and tear behind you.
My girlfriend took me to Faith and Freedom Coalition 2 years ago, and it was in Nashville. Many, many good people there. And they had the big names, you had, Donald Trump spoke for an hour and 15, 20 minutes, and honest to Pete, I have never seen him like that. He was relaxed, he was funny, he was intelligent, he was coming up with new things all the time. The man's mind's there. But and other, many big speakers, Mike Pompeo and Newt Gingrich and, I forget what the gal's name is, Judge something, one that's on Fox. Anyway, yes, Janine. Anyway, there were a lot of speakers, but the ones that touched my heart were the simple people in the breakout sessions that would stand up, and this pastor would say, I'm running for this. And there was another guy who was just, I guess, a simple businessman who was going to run against the mayor in New York. And there was another teacher that stood up and she was going to run for the school board. Just one after the other giving stories of how I have to do this. We have to make a difference. We are losing what we were born here to have. And if we don't do something, we're going to lose it. And, then, of course, you hear Reagan's quote where you can, in just one generation, lose your freedoms. And so I had to run. I was retired, and I'd been a teacher for 6 years, run my own school, actually, for 5 years. And I could go into more things, but I felt very qualified to make good decisions for children, and so I did, little knowing that any of this was going to fall out here. And I've done my best to be a good, and the people of Sunol, when I walk and talk to them, they know that I've done my best to be a good school board member, and I hope that will come across on the ballots. We're trying real hard to make sure that our Register of Voters, who does not have a good track record, that we can have an honest election. We're trying legally to procure that, and that costs money, and we don't have any. So at any rate, but I appreciate your listening.
Wow, so real. Yeah, I think the last talk was what touched me is we're talking about government and getting from government or whatever, but Robert Kennedy, right? It's not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So anyway, we'll take another 5 or 10 minutes. We'll start at 1:30. Okay? John Kennedy, not Robert. Okay, right. Excuse me, John. Thank you. I messed up some names earlier. three times.
So just as a quick update, we have a QR code up here. It's an updated one. It's going to have all 4 slide presentations from the day. So if you just scan this with your phone camera, you should be able to get all 4 slide decks.
Joe, once you scan that, what do you do with that later? I'm putting it in the website. Yes, you can save the link on the website. You're sure it's working because it doesn't link on the website?
Okay. Check. Okay, we're going to start now. It's 1:35, 5 minutes off, but We're doing well. Could everyone please take your seat? The forces of division. Before that, we're gonna have a call to action at the very end. But so I just want to mention tomorrow, at 8 o'clock until 11 o'clock, there's the American Legion. We have a breakfast just on the other side of this building downstairs. So if you want to have breakfast and help donate money, it's actually a good breakfast for a small price. And then they use the money for really good things, helping others, helping the vets, or doing public things. So there is a breakfast here on Sunday morning, the fourth Sunday of every month. So I just wanted to promote that. So right now, we are going to now go into our third lecture for today. This is on the forces of division. We're going to continue with David Burgess. Dr. Burgess, please. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Let me get. I need my slides. Okay, here it is. Sorry, I just need to get my presentation queued up. Good afternoon, everyone. How you doing? All right, you just had a great lunch, right? Ready for a nap?
Coffee's hot.
Yeah, get an extra cup if you need it. Yeah, I guess before I start, I just want to say grateful to be here in the Veterans Building. My father was a 28-year veteran. Uncle Sam requested his presence during World War II, and he got out for a while and got back in. So was in the first MASH outfit in Korea, which I found out at his funeral because those guys didn't talk about anything. But so it's good to be here. I'm a product of Uncle Sam. The other thing I wanted to say is that Frank promised I would give you the most depressing lecture that you've ever heard. So I think I need to get a new agent. Maybe you should seriously consider getting another marketing person, Frank. Okay, so anyway, here we go. So we're going to look at what we're calling, I don't know, oh, hello. I hope you got your code scanned. Oh, yeah, that's better. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't know, we call this the woke revolution. It's a term that has been used by people both for and against. My son says maybe social justice revolution is more appropriate, but in any event, we spent this morning looking at two previous revolutions, in part because I think we're going to see that there are some similarities, right? I hope tonight when you go to sleep, before you go asleep, this slide will appear before you, that it will be burned into your brain, and you'll dream about it tonight. But, we're seeing a lot of the same stuff, right? Anyway, I'm not going to talk anymore about this slide because I've talked about it a lot already, but we'll see how it plays out during what we're calling the woke revolution. All right, so you guys are all familiar with these terms, right? It's everywhere now: diversity, equity, and inclusion. As you recall, the French Revolution was based on liberty, equality, and fraternity. These are the highest ideals of Enlightenment rationalism. The Russian Revolution, the slogan was peace, land, and bread. These were materialist ideals. Now we live in the age of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It appears that there is a mandatory law of three here. I don't know where that comes from, but the question is, what is the philosophical basis for this new vision? And a lot of people are telling you this is just more Marxism, but actually I don't believe that. And if you look at the people, we're going to look at some of the people that are promoting this now, and that's not where they're drawing their inspiration from. So actually, I will argue, as Frank said earlier, this comes from postmodern critical theory, and it's based on postmodernism. So, short story is, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the race and gender theorists at the academy, at the universities, they had previously been focused, they were Marxist in their critique. And that had been the cutting edge. But after the collapse of the Soviet Union, they replaced Marxism with what was then an emerging philosophy called postmodernism. And it couldn't be more distinct. I can tell you from my own experience walking through a university bookstore. Before the Soviet Union collapsed, every class in social sciences and humanities and the education department, everybody had Marxist texts. After that happened, there were no more Marxist texts, right? But there was these emerging fields of ethnic studies and women's studies, and they were all being replaced by postmodernism, right? So let me tell you what that is, because it's not widely known. First of all, it is what I call post-atheistic. Okay, most of the slides I'm using today are slides that I didn't make, but they're made by academics who are teaching these ideas, and so it's just a fair representation of what's being taught. This one's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, right? All truth is relative, of course, except for this statement. But, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but so postmodernism, I call it post-atheistic. You recall that the French Enlightenment thinkers were deists and the Marxists were atheists. Postmodernism doesn't only reject God, but they reject truth itself, right? And I just want you to think, as we talk about these ideas, you may not know where they're coming from, but they're fluctuating. They're all through society, and you're going to come across them, right? But the rejection of truth, the idea of truth, is based on the postmodern theory of deconstruction. I'll tell you a little bit about what that is. We don't need to go into great detail. But deconstruction questions the very idea of fixed meaning, of any fixed meaning. Meaning is always deferred and provisional and ultimately relative, right? So it's a pure form of relativism, because without a stable sense of meaning, of course, there can be no truth. So it's antagonistic to the very notion of truth, right? So not only is there no God, there are no universal truths, no religious or philosophical truths, even rationality in science. It's actually critical of the very Enlightenment ideas that we looked at earlier. It is post-Enlightenment as well, right? So it's why I say it's not atheist, it's not militantly atheist like Marxism is. Rather, it's actually rather indifferent to the question of God, because, I mean, Derrida, who was the founder of deconstruction, and this is a little bit about his biography, he was an Algerian who was raised and educated in the French system. He argues that there is no truth without God, right? It's also true that without truth, there is no God, right? So they're not even interested in the question. Also, postmodernists believe that truth is a story that we tell ourselves. They call it, you may have heard this term, a meta-narrative. That just means it's a story we tell ourselves about the meaning and goal of life and of history. But postmodernists reject meta-narratives, right? Which, by the way, includes Marx, as we will see. So what we understand as truths are actually just an expression of an extension of power. This is a picture, actually, a number of pictures of Michel Foucault, who's the author of this idea. He says, knowledge is produced by the powerful. It serves the purpose of maintaining their privilege and their power. So he refers to this as power knowledge. Knowledge, whatever it is always an expression of power, right? So, of course, this also gets at the notion of truth, right? It's just an expression of power. So, and he refers to it as power knowledge. You see this when in his stuff all the time. That's the way he writes it, right? So there's now no power relation without the correlative constitution of a field of knowledge, and nor any knowledge that is not also presuppose and constitute at the same time power relations. I just want to point out, there are some similarities here with Marx, but there's also some profound differences as well. And in fact, it begins with a rejection of Marxism. So this was an academic's slide to try to show the difference between the old feudal power relations, which is based on domination, and the forms of struggle, which is important in the postmodernist view of the world, are largely ethnic or religious. In capitalism, of course, it's exploitation, which leads to class struggle. But in this, actually, it says modern, but it should say postmodern. The form of power is considered to be subjection, which is, again, a little bit depressing. Okay, I'll own up to that. But that all relationships entail this kind of subjection. And so the response is struggle for identity or resistance. And again, how many times have you heard, resist or resistance? This is where it comes from, right? So, yeah, I'm not going to go too deeply into the theory. It is after lunch, but power for Foucault does come. It's not a top-down thing. It comes from below, and it's just so many multiple strategies that are being deployed, and so the key thing is, for Marx, he thought he could get rid of power through the revolution, and that as a result of the revolution, there'd be a classless society and everybody would be free and equal. For Foucault, that's a meta-narrative. It's a dream. It's not possible. Power's everywhere. It's in every relationship, right? It's in your family. It's in your marriage. It's everywhere. Okay, so this is a very relativistic point of view as well, as was Derrida's. Basically, right, all opinions are equally true, or I would argue also equally untrue, right? And all beliefs the same. So I think most important for us to understand is that Foucault rejects the idea that history has any goal or purpose or direction. Actual history is just a series of events. It may not be entirely random, but it's just what comes next, right? There is no purpose. In other words, again, pure relativism. There's no purpose in life, there's no purpose in history, and it leads in no particular direction. But it exists in every institution within society, right? So, it's kind of nihilistic, in fact. Power is not concentrated, though, in these two classes as Marx would have it. It's more of a grid, I'm going to show you one attempt to try to map out Foucault's power grid. Study this closely. There'll be a quiz later. Yeah, it's thank you. So power is dispersed throughout society, but not equally, right? It's not evenly divided. Some have more than others, and it can't be tamed or eliminated, as Marx would have it, but it can be resisted, right? You hear a lot about resistance. And the only way to fight the power of the privileges is either resist or to fight it with a counterpower, form your own counterpower against it. Again, it's not Marxism. There's lots of points that differ from Marx, but this idea that there's power implies that there's just oppression everywhere, right? And in every relationship, right? So it does have elements that touch on some of Marxist themes, right? So this oppressor and oppressed exists not just in class relationships, but in every relationship. So again, this is postmodernism is kind of a layered set of theories. So the view of human nature in postmodernism, again, not exactly like Marx, but has some similarities. It's considered, though, a function of social conditions. For Marx, again, it was about the mode of production and the relations of production. He thought it was a function of class culture. But postmodernism sees human nature as constructed by all social interactions. And this is another term that you probably have heard, but it's socially constructed, right? So we are socially constructed. So that means, and I wouldn't, again, this is just an example of a textbook example of what this means. I'm not going to go into great detail about it, but it means that your identity is determined by your place in this power grid that I showed. And it's endlessly fluid. It depends on the forces that are acting upon you, right? So this is what postmodernists mean when they say that our identities are socially constructed. There's no stable or fixed you. You are constantly being constructed by the forces of power around you. So this strikes at the heart of identity. We're going to talk more about that, and also Frank will as well. So then the argument, as I said, the postmodernists, they gave up on Marxism and they aren't that focused on class. Rather, instead, they focus on race and gender. And that's why all the discussion in the culture today is about what? It's about race and gender, right? And especially, anyway, we'll get there. So the social construction of race, right? It basically, it says that my identity is based on the social meaning people have attached to it. It's not based on any of my immutable characteristics, right? My race has less to do with my skin pigment and more to do with the place assigned to me in the power grid. That's what essentially postmodernism believes. And the same is true for gender. Society imposes on me the definition of what it means to be a boy or girl, a man or woman, and expects me to conform to it. So it's setting up this structure where power is defining you, and what is your response? Is to resist, right? Or to fight. So yes, it sounds, there are similarities with Marx's dialectic, right? But it does have this built in, this kind of notion of struggle, but again, it's coming from a different source. So I call this the founding myth of postmodernism, and what do I mean by that? They assert, as Frank mentioned in his previous lecture, axiomatically, that there's no truth, everything is relative, and all identity is social constructed. So it's mythic in the sense that these are not ideas for which they argue. It's beliefs which they accept that don't need to be argued or demonstrated, but merely asserted. Right? They are the founding principles, and in that way they have a mythic resonance. Right? But I will say this, they're not yet an ideology, as you recall from our previous lecture. This is the philosophy, right? But not yet an actionable political agenda. But anyway, that's coming. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this person, Kimberly Crenshaw. She's the one who, we're going to talk about her in a minute, who created the idea of intersectionality. I just want to say, like with the French and Bolsheviks, philosophy doesn't make revolutions. It takes ideology and a political program. So beginning in the 1990s and 2000s, postmodern philosophy was adopted by the race and gender theorists at the university. You know, I studied with some of these people, right? And they previously largely been Marxist. Kimberly Crenshaw was a student of Derek Bell, who was the founder of critical race theory, who was a Marxist, but she transformed it on the basis of postmodernism. This is Judith Butler, who I also studied with. And she's an important gender theorist. And like the critical race theorist, she replaced class-based critiques of Marxism and adopted the postmodern philosophy as the basis for the revolutionary gender ideology. Butler was and is a key figure in gender theory and also queer theory. Her book, Gender Trouble, is a seminal work in that field. Right? These are two of many key people who transitioned the race and gender theory based now on postmodernism. So, what comes from that? What are the implications, right? So as we've seen, the postmodernists rejected truth, which included the Enlightenment idea. They're actually post-Enlightenment. They rejected the Enlightenment idea of objective truth and science. We'll see some examples of that in a minute. They argued that objective truth and the Enlightenment culture was oppressive to marginalized groups. In the absence of this objective truth, which they reject, it is my experience, my truth, right? You heard that one? Yeah, right. And that's the ground of the woke ideology. It's based on experience. Their truth, the truth of their experience is that they're oppressed, because that's how they feel. So truth is replaced by their truth, and there's a new cogito. This is actually a book I haven't had a chance to pick up yet, a new one. And it's changed from I think, therefore I am, to I feel, therefore I am, right? This is the transition from Enlightenment to post-Enlightenment thought. This is a critique, but still. Basically, the new founding myth is I feel oppressed, therefore I am oppressed. Of course, this is not to suggest that there's no discrimination in the world and everybody's equal and we all get along. I'm just saying that this is the philosophy behind the current woke ideology. And now I'm going to look at some of the elements of that exist in what is woke ideology. So first, I would say is standpoint theory. And again, this has to do with my experience. It's another example. Nancy Hartsock was the founder, another person I studied with. She originally came up with this idea as a Marxist. She was a Marxist, but it has later been adopted by the race and gender theorists, right? And so it suggests, right, that my standpoint, my view, my perspective, is the place from which I critically view the world, right? And so you don't have my experience, so you can't evaluate my truth, right? You have nothing to say about my truth. So, and one that has become huge, right, is this notion of white supremacy, right? So the point of standpoint theory is this. As a non-white person, and I'm going to play that role here just for a second. I can't play it for very long, but I see you and your culture as focusing on perfectionism, quantity over quality, individualism, objectivity, and a right to comfort, right? And all these other items. That's what white culture is. That's what white supremacy is, right? Now, unfortunately for you, you have nothing to say about this, right? Because it's not your experience. You don't experience white supremacy if you're white. And probably even not if you're Asian, right? It's a little fuzzy there, but... So actually, when I was young, we used to call it stereotyping, and we thought it was a bad thing. But now it's in vogue. So because knowledge is not based on an objective standard, right? This objectivity is a white trait. Then it's based on experience, and this is my experience of you, right? Which has led to the idea that white people are fragile because you can't talk about these things. If you're white, you don't know how to talk about them. Well, first of all, again, it's not your experience, so you don't know anything about it. All right? And you can't even have a conversation about it. Now, to be clear, a conversation means listening to people tell you about your white supremacy, right? It's not a dialogue, right? Don't get a crazy idea like that. But it means that you understand your white supremacy. And if you don't understand it, if you resist it, well, you're just demonstrating your white supremacy. Right? It's a good hustle. I got to give them that. It's a good hustle. Right? And look, because racial issues are look, our society has everybody here in the world, and we've made some tremendous progress, but, let's not kid ourselves. We have a long way to go still before we truly, can express the right heart of love towards each person. So there's a point there about which we have some discomfort, right? Okay, so that's the standpoint theory. The next one is mapping oppression, right? So, as you can see here, there's a line of domination, and this is a binary here, right? So, I can't leave the microphone, but if you see each corresponding, topic below is somebody who's oppressed, and there's a line pointing to the oppressor up above, right? This is actually, I kid you not, I make this not up. This is being taught at the universities. This is created by an academic by the name of Catherine Polly Morgan. Catherine's no longer with us, but this is the state of education, right? But actually, even this is too binary, and so Kimberly Crenshaw came up with this notion of intersectionality. So they love grids, right? So each one of these areas represents an area of oppression, right? A potential area of oppression. Let me read the quote. This is Kimberly's quote. I'm not, this is just an honest, rendering of what she says. Intersectionality is a lens through which you can see where power comes and collides. Again, she's Foucauldian now. Where it locks and intersects. It is the acknowledgement that everyone has their own unique experiences of discrimination and privilege, right? So the mapping was a little too one-dimensional, right? So this one, you know, again, it's kind of a manifestation of Foucault's power grid. So wherever you are in this area, you know, there's areas of oppressing and oppression, right? And that's the state of the art now. This is at the core of what's being taught now is critical race theory, which has led some wags to come up with the oppression Olympics, right? So if you are you know, you can identify who's the most oppressed person, then you win, right? Anyway, it's a, on the one hand, I get it. It's, yeah, anyway, I better let that go. It does suggest, though, that there's a level of this that's just maybe a little bit ridiculous, but okay. And again, to get back to my earlier point, there's a difference here between the Marxists and the woke ideologists, right? You have the Marxists saying, well, we can solve all this once we overthrow the capitalists, right? That's their argument. And then the woke ideologist is like, so my revolution has to wait for yours, right? So there is some tension here. That's why this is not just Marxism. But what is the most key, I would say, to the woke ideology is this notion of identity politics. It also began as a Marxist construct back in the 70s, but in its current state, it's based on postmodern theory. You know, back in the 70s when we were fighting this notion from the point of view of identity politics, it was, the goal was civil rights and sexual liberation, right? Those were the movements that were happening. But the postmodernists now argue that these only serve to support the dominant groups and their oppression, right? That's why actually, you know, if you talk to the critical race theorists today, they're not big fans of Martin Luther King Jr., right? He just, he didn't solve anything from their point of view, right? So anyway, they've moved on. So if identity is socially constructed, the woke ideologists argue that we have to embrace that identity that's being given to us and not resist it. And we do that for the purposes of political struggle. It's a source of empowerment. My identity is my position in the social grid from which I fight, you know, my oppressors, right? Again, identity politics is now grounded in these grids that I showed you before, right, of oppressor and oppressed. And that's why, I mean, you know, Marxism did talk about oppression, but it is now the currency, right, based on this postmodern philosophy. This is actually a quote from my article, which I want to plug in the New World Encyclopedia. Oh, did it? Oh, I'm gonna say the quote in a minute. Yeah, it's not on the screen. My quote is this, and it's my article on critical theory. No, excuse me. This is my article on identity politics. I have a good one on critical theory as well. We have a great encyclopedia. I'm taking a chance to plug it. It's a shameless plug. So they adopted the view, that is the postmodernists, that political struggle now meant that society must affirm their marginalized and excluded identities. So it means I'm not fighting for a place to be part of a larger collective. You have to embrace me based on my sense of marginalization and my sense of oppression. That's what you have to do. That's because that's who I am. That's how I'm defined, right? So if identity is socially constructed, these ideologists argued that we have to embrace that and use that to fight. Right? So, and that, by the way, in DEI is what they mean by inclusion. They don't mean they want to be included in the larger society. Inclusion means you accept them in their marginalized and excluded identities. Okay? And in a way, again, we're back to Descartes. We never really left him. This is the complete realization of the idea of the cogito. All truth emanates from me. It was previously the thinking being, and now I'm the feeling subject, but it all emanates from me. And as we're going to see as we look at more at identity, right, it's my self-definition is what's, however I choose to. Right? So any notion of good and evil have been redefined to fit the oppression narrative, right? And that's why you see, you're familiar with Nicole Hannah-Jones's 1619 Project, right? So in the liberal worldview, society could be reformed. In the Marxist worldview, society could be rebuilt after a revolutionary transformation. In the postmodern worldview, society is created on the basis of discrimination. Oppression is built into the system. You can fight power with power, but you can't tame it. You must destroy the system of oppression. But even if you do, there's no utopian outcome, just endless struggle against oppression. Right? Let's think about that for a second. Right? It is the most nihilistic of views, right? I can try. Give me a second. In the liberal worldview, society could be reformed. In the Marxist worldview, society could be rebuilt after a revolutionary transformation. In the postmodern worldview, society is created on the basis of discrimination. Oppression is built into the system. It is, you can fight power with power, but you can't tame it, right? You must destroy the system of oppression, but even if you do, there's no utopian outcome, just endless struggle against oppression. So critical race theory began as a Marxist legal critique, but, as I say, under the influence of Kimberly Crenshaw and others, it's transitioned to a postmodern worldview, right? So, again, these are examples of what I've just been saying. Racism is entrenched into the fabric of society and is intersectional, right? Which means you can be oppressed on multiple levels at the same time. So, Frank, even you too can be oppressed. And so the dominant narratives in education, we're going to talk about education in a minute for you teachers, like objectivity and meritocracy, color blindness, equal opportunity, they have to be challenged, right? They're parts of the oppression. And the experiential knowledge of people of color is legitimate and crucial to understanding inequality. So this is what they call counter storytelling, right? They have to speak, that means speaking my truth, right? And then it has to, race and racism has to be analyzed across all the different spectrums, right? So, yeah, this, you know, we'll go on. I'm not going to read the whole quote, but racial oppression is systemic, which means it's built into the system. The reality is racism has been woven into the social fabric of our society, and casting a blind eye to it or not acknowledging it will not improve things, right? So we have to examine how racism is built into the system, right? If this were true, you'd be able to define what it is and how you can remove it, but actually that's not the point. The point is it can't be removed, right? So we just have to spend our time focusing upon how racist we are. There may be even some truth to it, but how is that going to help us? This is my question. How's it going to make us better? Okay. And the same is true for gender as well. Gender oppression is systemic, right? So so familiar now, Marxism was material, based on material. So based on Marxism, these are the identifiers, right? It's modern. I'm not going to get into structural and post-structuralism. That's a little too deep in the weeds. But it's based on the old Marxist critical theory, and the goal, again, was equality. Some notion that we could all be, find a way to become equal. But in the postmodernist rubric, based on deconstruction, the goal is difference, right? The goal is divisive, right? It's you have to accept me in my difference, but you can't understand my difference because you don't experience it. Yeah, it is challenging. Yeah, but you have to accept me in my marginalized state. That's the point I want to make. Right? So, if you wonder why transgenderism has suddenly become such a hot button issue, it's because it represents the ultimate attack on identity, on biology, and the farthest links at least you can currently go in an attempt at self-definition. Right? The ideologists see it as the tip of the spear in the fight against gender oppression. Right? And of course, it's a sliding scale. All right, so those of you who are in education, have you seen the genderbread person before? You have, right? Of course you have. And if you're just a parent, you should be aware of this, because this is what your children are being taught, right? Gender is a sliding scale, and people are encouraged to identify as gender fluid, right? So these are the binaries, but the point is that it's fluid. You can move back and forth as you choose, right? Based on the day of the week, I suppose. I don't know. So, gender identity is the clearest attack on both science and objective truth. It asserts, again, gender is socially constructed, as is everything in postmodernism. So they call biology, if you believe in biology, they call biology essentialist, right? Which, I guess, means that some people still consider it a fact, right? But again, because the postmodernists believe that enlightenment is a source of oppression, and science is one of the high moments of the Enlightenment, right? So we need to make sure that biology doesn't stand in the way of expressing my own lived experience, right? Yes?
David, what was your first statement? Gender identity is an attack on biology, and what else was the second one?
Okay. Well, I said gender identity is the clearest attack on science and objective truth. Yeah. And then biology is the science that they're attacking, right? Yeah, I mean, literally, they reject biology because if you accept biology, there aren't 97 different genders, right? So. But the cutting edge of gender theory is what they call queer theory. And it's queer not only in the sense of gay, because actually there are gay people who don't consider themselves queer, and there's queers who aren't gay, right? It's the cutting edge because it is based on deconstruction, and it's designed to be subversive and to break down all distinctions, even those that were previously considered untouchable. Forever, the gay community has argued that homosexuality was based on biological innateness, right? But that is not the position of the queer theorists. They attack that. Nothing is essential, right? So there's even room for tremendous, not just disagreement, but attacks, internal attacks within the postmodern world. So I say queer theory is probably the pinnacle of woke ideology because it's an attack on human identity. You know, hearteningly, even the Pope, and I'm not Catholic, but even the Pope rejected this recently as a grave threat to human dignity. These are the elements of the woke ideology. So this is woke ideology as opposed to the philosophy that we looked at. What about the agenda? So, as we know, the woke agenda is DEI. It's the law of three. But this revolution, unlike the previous two, you know, it promises systemic change to dismantle the system of oppression. All right, that's the goal. All right. So what's that look like? Well, of course, the key moment of this, I think, is equity, right? And this is again, those of you who are in schools, have you seen these slides before? You have, right? You must have. Yeah. This is how equity is often represented, right? So it means that in order that we need to have an equal outcome, right?
Somebody get something taken away from them.
Yeah, well, thank you. Here, why don't you give? No, that's perfectly right. That's exactly right. The idea is that the boxes are just lying around, and this sorry SOB here has picked it, and you know, he should have given it to the shorter person, or if not given it to them, then they need to take it away so that we can all have an equal outcome, right? So it needs, you know, things need to be redistributed so that we all have the same outcome. And they focus, again, there are points to be made, right? We don't all start from the same background. We don't all start with the same level of opportunity, right? So they focus on that. But also, we don't all have the same talents, and we all don't have the same effort, right? Which are equally important, you know. So, but that doesn't get discussed. But the point is that if we just redistribute everything so everybody has an equal outcome, then everything will be wonderful, right? I will point out that this has been tried before, right? You recall in the French Revolution, they took the church's holdings and distributed it to the poor. Did it create an equal, fair, and just society? No. And the Bolsheviks, they stole the land from the nobles. They took control of all of the assets in the nation, and they divided it. And of course, class enemies were eliminated in the name of social justice. So this is our effort to make you know, equity happen before, and it hasn't actually led to a good outcome. Okay, so that's equity, but also the DEI agenda. So it's the S in ESG. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm skipped ahead a slide. Okay. So I wanted to point out DEI has made a march through the institutions. So it began in academic institutions, first at the university, but it also filtered down into K through 12. Then it became embedded in the corporate HR departments. If you work at a corporation, you've had DEI training, right? If you didn't, I'd like to know how you managed, right? And it's not. So But also it's the S in the corporate governance thing of ESG, right? The social aspect. And it's permeated our legal system and government, right? It's now embedded in government, right? So it has marched through the institutions of the American society, right? And I would say this is, of course, now this is a slide by a critic, not by a supporter, but it has ended up in a cancel culture, right? It's the proponents of the woke agenda are not yet in a position of power where they can impose their will. They don't control the government. They control aspects of society, but not the government entirely. So cancel culture is what the woke ideologists use to attack enemies in contemporary American society. We're still a democratic culture, unlike France and Russia was. So they don't have the political tools at this point to create a reign of terror, right? But they will absolutely destroy your life if they can and you get in their way. And people have, you know, there's so many examples of it, right? If you're a public figure and you don't come out on the right side of the issues, and they're, you know, they will absolutely come after you. Some people's careers have been destroyed, right? And anyway, I like this slide. Yeah, I mean, it is eating at and trying, again, to dismantle the system of America, which now is considered racist, sexist, and oppressive, right? There's constant calls now to you know, that the system is oppressive and it has to be removed, right? So now Frank's going to share a little bit about what the opportunities are for the future, and there are problems that need to be addressed. But again, based on postmodernism, it will simply be the elimination of anybody who stands in their way. That's what we know. We know that because we've been, you know, reviewing the history, right? So, but you know, I'm not an alarmist by nature, but let's pay attention. I added this slide this week, right? These demonstrations that have popped up on campuses all over the country, right? And this slogan that Palestine will be free from the river to the sea. What does that mean? It means the elimination not only of the Jewish state, but of the Jewish people, right? Because they believe that land belongs to them. So, and you know, history tells us that the means of getting rid of enemies who oppose their justice is to eliminate them, right? So, can that happen? You know, maybe not. I don't know. I think it depends on us. Right? We need to recognize the pattern. We've seen this movie before, right? And we need to stand up and say no. Right? If we can recognize people's God-given value and create a common destiny, we can absolutely stand up to and defeat the woke ideology. But that's completely up to us. All right, well, thank you for your attention. One more time. Actually, this is a slide I want you to memorize, so I hope you see it in your dreams tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you, Dr. Burgess. Excellent. Yeah, excellent. Excellent. So we are going to take a 10-minute break and come back at, what's it, 2:40, right? 2:40, you got 10 minutes. And everyone knows James Lindsay. James Lindsay, he's a really expert on critical race theory, and he wrote a recent book, Queer Theory. But he spent 7 years trying to educate the politicians in Oklahoma and to be able to stop the CRT there, and he was able to do that. But it took 7 years, so it's not easy. Okay, let's take a break. Thank you.